Look, I love a good sourdough baguette, but the thick, hard crust and those huge bubbles where your butter just gathers in are not exactly what I want in a baguette. So I wanted to make a baguette with a thinner crust, finer crumb, less bubbles, and almost by accident hit about 4 times the protein of your standard baguette. Your usual sourdough baguette has 6 grams of protein per medium baguette, and it's kind of that size, I'd say, roughly. Mine has 27 grams. The crust is more on the crispy side. It still has crunch, it's still satisfying, but not hard to chew. And the inside is airy and fluffy and fine, and all thanks to cottage cheese and whey protein. And today I'm going to show you how to handle the slightly softer dough, and I'm going to show you a comparison between Dutch oven baking and baguette pan baking, so you can decide if you really need a baguette pan, right? Let's make this. And while I was at it, I decided to make 2 slightly different doughs to see the effects on crust and crumb. Little did I know that I would run into a few nightmares and try 4 versions until I had them solved. So we start as usual with cottage cheese, whey protein powder, water, and blend that. And in my second version I added a little bit of vitamin C for a crisper crust and a tiny bit of olive oil for a softer crumb. The blended version then is really smooth. Pour it into a bowl and then add your sourdough starter. Mix it quickly, then mix the salt with the flour, and I used bread flour for my first version and all-purpose flour for my second version. The protein mix goes in and I use my dough whisk just to get a slightly shaggy dough here. Now this is the version without olive oil and the version with olive oil. Quite sticky. Now they go to the bulk ferment, and here's a trick for you. Use a dough scraper to get your bowl clean. Then, with wet hands, do your stretch and folds every 30 minutes. You just pull the dough up and fold it over itself, turn the bowl by 90 degrees and do the same again. You do that about 3 to 4 times each 30 minutes and you see the sourdough magic working. The dough is really smooth at this point, and after doing this 3 times, the dough is also less sticky. Now, after the full bulk ferment overnight, there is no stickiness left. The olive oil dough is a bit wetter, but still not sticky. So I turn it out onto a work surface to shape it. And you see the nice bubbles there. And this was still slightly sticky as sourdough is, so I used a bit of flour on my hands and on the dough to make the working easier. And I folded it over itself a few times to get kind of a rectangle or lock shape that has a bit of tension, so my baguettes keep their shape. Folded it again because it seemed a bit loose. And then I had kind of a lock that I could divide by 2. The recipe portion makes 2 baguettes, but I test here obviously with 4, as I test 2 baking methods and 2 doughs. And then you stretch that out to a rectangle, fold over the first half towards the middle, push it with your fingers, then pull the lower half on top and knit it close. And then you just roll the dough a little bit on your work surface, shape it if you like into those typical sourdough tips. There's a seam that goes to the bottom of the baking pan. And here's my first mistake. I used a damp towel to cover the baguettes, which is great for a short rise, but not for overnight. And here's the second problem, the dragging when scoring. Now I started with the Dutch oven, and as you can see, the shaping was a bit newish. And there were slight issues with getting them in there, as you can see, because Dutch oven is hot. So patting it down, trying it again, not great, is it now? the baguette pan I sprayed with a bit of water, which was a good idea, and as you can see, the baguette pan version came out quite nicely. So here's the Dutch oven with a rather flat bottom, and it's not very shiny, is it? How about the crunch? Can you see the problem? That didn't go as planned. But I pried it loose with an offset spatula and put baguette pan preparation on my list of to fix things. But onwards with the comparison. So here is the Dutch oven version, which was a bit too chewy for my liking. There wasn't much crispiness and a very open crumb, hence said butter falling through. This is the olive oil version, which had a slightly finer crumb, but not much of a difference, as you can see here. So it was a bit disappointed. This is the baguette pan version, which looked a lot better, closer to what I wanted. Finer crumb, crispier crust, and the two compared look very similar. And cut open, there wasn't much of a difference either, but you see the flat bottom on the Dutch oven version and the really rounded version of the baguette pan. I decided to go ahead and remake this version without olive oil and vitamin C. But first I wanted to eliminate the drying of the crust overnight when I let it rise, and tried cling film, which only worked halfway. But I learned from the baguette pan, oiled it first, then lined it with baking parchment, and while there was a bit of drying out from the baguettes overnight and still dragging, I tried different tools because, you know, I thought maybe a different tool might fix the dragging while scoring, but no avail. The baking, however, looked really nice at this point and no sticking anymore. So that was a success. But if you look closer here, you see on the right side the baguettes popped open a bit. So they puffed where they shouldn't puff. So my final fix here is a bag. I used the bin bag, blew a bit of air in it, clipped it close to keep the air so it doesn't touch the baguettes, put it in the fridge overnight, and then 30 minutes into the freezer to fix my scoring. And if you see here, that was my previous scoring, bit of a nightmare. And now the knife goes through relatively cleanly. So you cut relatively deep, about 1 centimeter, you wouldn't think so, and then bake it for, with steam, about 8 minutes, without steam another 8, and then you get these beautifully perfect baguettes with 27 grams protein. And the crunch. Yeah, I'm impressed. Pulling apart, they look really lovely. They have exactly the fine crumb and thin crust that I was aiming for. And how does it taste?